Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I will be reviewing a PowerPoint presentation that will go over how to conduct the Count Us In effort that will be going on January 27th here in King County. A few of the things that we're going to cover today. What is the purpose of a pit count? Pit count stands for point in time, which is the type of count that we'll be doing for the Count Us In effort. We'll also be reviewing why the pit count matters, what the pit count will tell us, what you will be doing on the day of the count, and then lastly, we'll just go over some next steps and reminders. So the purpose of the pit count. The Department of Housing and Urban Development requires this point in time count to be completed of every homeless person during the last 10 days of January. Currently, these counts are required every other year. And the reason why they're happening in the last 10 days of January are because these counts occur all over the country, and they try to make it as organized as possible to minimize double counting of homeless individuals. This count is important for a few different reasons. It increases the community understanding of homelessness, it retains and improves funding for homeless services, and meets the federal data reporting requirements. In addition, it generates valid and accurate data regarding individuals and families who are experiencing homelessness in King County. And then it allows us to link homeless data collection efforts to national and local strategic program and policy planning. So by participating in this count effort, we are helping to collect the data that will be used to receive funding across King County for service providers who work with the homeless population. There are a few different components to this pit count process. You will be participating in the general street count. That's that orange box that you're seeing on the screen right now. The general count is conducted on January 27th in the early hours of the morning, starting at about 2 a.m. The youth count also is conducted on January 27th and happens a little bit later in the day. That first box is the shelter count, and that is conducted on the evening of January 26th. So we get that shelter count information from all of the various shelters that are located in King County. And then finally, there's a survey that is distributed in the field in the 2 to 3 weeks following the actual count day. Next, I'm going to review the definition of unsheltered homelessness. So the pit count is one of many strategies that the federal government uses to understand homelessness and allocate funding for services. The definition used for the pit count is somewhat limited, so I just want to remind you that this process is just one piece of the whole puzzle. And by focusing on a specific population with specific needs, we're able to better focus on getting the job done in order to help ensure an understanding of the population as well as to help receive funding for this population. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this word for word because it's an important definition. Individuals and families who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, including individuals and families with a primary nighttime residence that is a public or private place not designated for or ordinarily used as a regular sleeping accommodation for human beings. On this slide, I review a little bit further what that means. So that definition includes makeshift shelters, streets, vehicles, parks, abandoned buildings, bus or train stations, airports, people sleeping in camping grounds. What it does not include are people who are couch surfing, people who are living in a double up situation. A double up refers to a house that is maybe meant for 4 people that is housing, 8 to 10 people. It also does not include people who are staying in rehabilitation or mental health facilities, does not include most people in jails or prisons, also does not include people who are awaiting eviction or foreclosure. Here you'll find a few pictures. This picture on the left is an example of an encampment. An encampment does not always mean a group of tents. Sometimes it can be makeshift shelters but this is an example of what some encampments look like. On the right is a picture of a transit center. So again, this is another place that if you see somebody sleeping outside, that would be included in this unsheltered count. In addition, people living in cars are included in this unsheltered count. So that's an important part of the count. So we wanted to take some time to review what that might look like. Only vehicles that are currently inhabited are included in the point in time count. So if you see a vehicle on the street that maybe looks like a homeless person might be living in it, we can only include it if there is a person staying in the car when you pass the car on the day of the count. So look for signs of habitation on this car when you're walking through the streets during the day of the count. Some things to keep an eye out for that would show that it's an inhabited vehicle would be fogged windows, electrical connections, screens or window coverings. There might be items such as household items, bags, clothes, shoes, inside and outside of the vehicle. There might be sounds of music or talking coming from inside the vehicle, or it might be in a known safe parking location or a known vehicle by your homeless guide. So the reason we're reviewing this is because we don't want you to be going up to the cars or knocking on windows and trying to get an idea of how many people or if anybody's staying in the vehicle. These are some signs that can tell you so you can look and make your decision solely based off of observation. Next, we're going to review some of the logistics of how this count is going to go down on the morning of January 27th. So, like I mentioned with the vehicles, this street count is a visual count of people residing on the street, in parks or open spaces, in vehicles, in abandoned or foreclosed buildings, or people living in makeshift shelters. The street count is planned while people are still in public shelters. So that's why we're doing this count from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. This timing is really important so that we're avoiding double counting any individuals. There will be people still staying in the shelters at this time from 2 to 6 a.m. So that way we won't be double counting somebody who is in a shelter in the morning and then leaves later. This time frame will allow us to ensure that we are not counting the same people in a shelter as well as on the streets. We also ensure that our street teams are aware of where the shelters are and are kind of avoiding those areas in order to not double count there. Here's a couple pictures of an example of what it'll look like on the day of the count when you show up to your deployment location. There'll be a table with some clipboards and some papers for you to sign. Usually there's a little bit of breakfast and some snacks offered. Next, some more logistics. Just to review, volunteers will not be paid for their time, nor will they be reimbursed for their mileage. So we're hoping that as volunteers, you will arrive and bring yourself, as well as hopefully a vehicle that you can drive. And our homeless guides are actually paid $15 for their time. So they get paid for their expertise during the count and for their time spent in training. All homeless guides must have a 2017 Pit Count referral card and a training attendance card in order to receive payment. All payments to guides will be made after the teams return to the deployment center on the day of the count. So as volunteers, this payment piece isn't something that you will need to be too concerned about. However, we wanted to review the information so that you understand how the guides are being paid. A few of the logistics to go over some further details about the timing. So at 2 a.m., volunteers and guides will arrive to the deployment location. Most of you should have signed up on our SurveyMonkey link. If not, that link will be listed at the end of this PowerPoint. And that will, through that SurveyMonkey link, will help determine which deployment center location you'll be arriving to. First off, you will be completing some paperwork. There's a sign-in sheet and a hold harmless agreement. We'll go over and review some of the safety protocols as well as review some of the forms and data quality standards. Then we'll take the time to create our teams. So the teams going out into the field will be comprised of 2 to 3 people, a volunteer, and a guide. We won't have any volunteers under the age of 18. Then we'll distribute our street count packets. That's the maps and the data collection forms. You'll get a couple clipboards and some pencils. You'll also have some guidelines that review this training. There'll be contact phone numbers so that you can get in touch with the deployment center captain. And then we'll also provide you with stickers to be worn on your jackets so that if anybody who might see you or ask what you're doing on the street, you can help identify and say you're part of the Count In effort. And then after all that's done, hopefully that happens pretty close to 2 a.m., you will be headed out into the field to begin the count. And then we ask that everybody is returning by 6 a.m. Excuse me. Next, I'm going to review a little bit about how the teams are created. So since this is a little bit of a new methodology and process for King County, we wanted to go over what that's going to look like when you arrive to the deployment center. So everybody, the volunteers and guides, both be signed and where to sit down and how to, and some of the safety tips that we're going to review. And then we'll also review quickly some of the count protocol. And then, like I mentioned in the previous slide, it'll be teams of 2 to 3 people that are 1 to 2 volunteers and 1 guide. So they're small teams, and we have one homeless guide who has the knowledge of the area, and then we'll have the 1 to 2 volunteers who have the vehicle and can help with the transportation as well as the data collection. The teams are then assigned a map location. So we want to remind you that through this effort, we will be covering the entirety of King County. So we have multiple different deployment centers, and each of those centers are required to cover a certain map area of King County. The deployment center captain will be in charge of managing the assignment process, and this will be which groups are going to which maps. Some of these maps will be pre-assigned, and that will be determined by local service providers and volunteers or guides who have specific knowledge of certain areas of King County. But most teams will be created and assigned on the night of the account when you arrive to the deployment center. This is a sample of the map that you will receive. Each team will receive 1 to 2 maps depending on how large the map area is. Each map is 1 census tract. You'll see the census tract is outlined in red, and you and your team are responsible to cover the entirety of your census tract. So we ask that you drive up every single road, you walk in all the parks. We just want to make sure that every area is covered. There's different colors here on the map, and I'll review what that means in a couple slides. We'll have these maps printed out for you when you arrive on the day of the count, and they're about 18 by 11 size, so they should be plenty big. This is the other piece of data collection material that you will use. So this is a screenshot of what the tally sheet will look like. You can see every line. You'll fill in 1 single line for every individual that you see. In these next couple slides, I'm going to review how to fill out the tally sheet and what those different colors on the maps mean. So here's what your map looks like. Again, the boundaries of your census tract are in this red colored line. You'll see on the right side there's the purple area. So as the volunteer, you'll work with your homeless guide to make sure that when you see somebody on one of the streets in this purple area, that you put them on the tally sheet that is correlated with that purple area. If you see somebody in this kind of greener area on the bottom, looks like that's only a few streets, you'll still want to make sure that you put any individuals in that area on the tally sheet that is connected with that green box. And again, we'll review all this information on the day of the count, and it'll make a little more sense when you have the papers in front of you. But I wanted to take the time during this online training to point out that it's very important that you use the correct tally sheet with the correct tally sheet with the correct color on your map. Here are some samples of how to fill out the tally sheets. So this first top one is an example if you were to see one individual on the street who looks to be in their 30s. So again, this is what I'm talking about when you have one line per individual. So you'll mark the category that's 25 to 59, you'll mark that you saw them on the street, and then you'll leave everything else blank. On the bottom is an example if you were to see a family. So say you might see 3 individuals in a family. This family is 2 adults and 1 young child. So that first line you can see under 18. The second and third lines you have marked the 25 to 59 category. And then you're going to go over to this family column and you're going to fill in for each person the bubble under the family title. And then you're going to draw a circle with your pen so that we know when we're processing the data that those 3 people are in one family. The next example would be if you see an encampment. So in King County, we define an encampment as 3 or more tents or semi-permanent structures, regardless of if they have been pop-ups or authorized and provided money by the city. So what you do if you see an encampment, and there's a few different types of encampments that you might see, so I gave 2 samples here of how to fill out the tally sheet. This top one is, say you see 3 tents, you don't know how many people are in them, so you just put tent and then you guess the age. You're thinking you see somebody in the 25 to 59 range. If you don't see the person or you're unsure, you can go ahead and mark unknown. But for this encampment, we're assuming that they were in a tent and you saw the person. And this encampment is made up of 3 tents. So then you go all the way over to the right and you fill in the bubble for encampment and you do a circle, and that shows that they were all in one encampment together. Below you'll see another sample of an encampment, and that would be lines 10 through 12. And this would be if you see an encampment that isn't actually tents. So you see 3 individuals and they're in some sort of makeshift shelter. However, they're all together, so that would be an encampment. So again, you fill in the bubble that's in the encampment column, and then you circle them together, and that signifies that was 3 individuals who have makeshift shelters, and that is seen as an encampment. I reviewed in an earlier slide how to tell if a vehicle should be included in the count or not. So if your team does decide that you have found a car that fits the definition, then this is how you will fill it out. On the top you can see line 1, there's a bubble filled in for car. So if you can't tell how many people are in the car, we ask that rather than guessing how many people in there, you just do 1 line for that car. If you are able to see who's in there, feel free to fill out 1 line for each person that you see where you're estimating their age. And then you can go ahead and still mark under the column of car for each person. However, if you don't know how many people are in, this is what it'll look like. It'll be a blank line up until car. In addition to this piece, on the back of your tally sheet, there'll be these boxes on the bottom, and that is where you can write the license plate, the last 4 digits of the license plate number of the car. We only ask for the last 4 digits. We're not using this information to try to track these cars down in any way. That's why it's just the last 4 digits. It's solely for the purposes so that we can ensure that we're not double counting this vehicle in 2 different areas. Now that we've finished reviewing the data collection materials, the maps, and the tally sheets, I want to go over the roles of your team. So the roles of the guide are to use their knowledge to identify individuals experiencing homelessness, to guide the team towards locations in the map assignment that are likely to have individuals experiencing homelessness, and to help distinguish between safe and potentially dangerous situations. So, the reasoning for pairing a volunteer with a guide is because the guide has some of that expertise knowledge that the volunteer might. So, the volunteer's role is to provide consultation and support in the team decisions. The volunteer is in charge of the transportation, and the volunteer is there to help ensure full coverage of the map assignment. So, together, the guide and the volunteer work together to cover the entire map area of your census tract and work together to fill in the data collection forms correctly. We ask that the teams reach a consensus together on who will be in charge of the tally sheet and ensuring the correct methodology is used. So for us, it doesn't matter whether the guide or the volunteer is actually filling in the tally sheet, but it's good to discuss these roles prior to going out in the field so that when you're out there, you have a system that works. Next, I want to go over some of the safety logistics of this count while you're out in the field. Our number one priority is that you are safe out there and you're not taking any risks. We do not want you to approach any individuals and ask them if they're homeless. This count is to observe and tally only. We ask that you stay with your teammate and don't wander off alone. We want you to be respectful of the individuals that you're counting. We want you to call your deployment center captain if you have any problems or questions, and you'll be provided with that number on the day of the count. If there's a true emergency, please call 911. We also ask that you don't take any photos while out in the field. We want to protect the confidentiality of the individuals that we are counting. A few more safety logistics. We want to make sure that you do not enter abandoned buildings or other hard to access areas unless the team is familiar with those locations. So if you approach an area within your census tract map that might seem a little dangerous, if you or your guide doesn't know what you're walking into, it's probably best just to play it safe and not go into that area. We don't want you to advertise your count location post count or keep any information that's confidential after the count day. So any of this information that you find out or collect during the count, we ask that you turn that into us when you're all done, and then you keep that information to yourself after. We don't want to be spreading any location information to the general public. And we will also be reviewing safety protocols on the day of the count. In order to prepare for the count, here are some things that you can do. You can wear comfortable shoes and clothes. You can dress warmly. We'll be completing this count rain or shine. So bring an umbrella or a rain jacket if necessary. Bring a car if you're able to drive. Bring a charged cell phone. Emphasis on the charged. You'll be out there for a few hours, and oftentimes people like to use their phones to check map areas and street names in addition to their hard copy maps. We also recommend bringing a flashlight since it will be dark while you're going out into the field. And get as much rest as you can the night and day before the count, because it'll be a late night from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. for us. So some of the next steps that will happen. You will be receiving an updated email in the coming weeks as we get closer to the count with any new information that we have for you, in addition to your deployment locations and where you should arrive on the day of the count. You're welcome to contact our PIT Count hotline if you have any questions. This number is dedicated to helping and assisting our volunteers. So you can call Connie at Applied Survey Research. The number is 408-813-2419, and she can help you with any specific questions, things you have to follow up this online training, or any questions regarding what to do on the day of the count or what to bring. So on this next slide, you can see the SurveyMonkey link, and that also will direct you with some of our contact information on who and where to get support from. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. I hope this helps educate you on a little bit better what to expect on the day of the count, and we really look forward to your participation.